New Marvel Snap patch means new Marvel Snap data mines. Today we're going to take a look at what are likely the final iterations of the cards releasing during the November season, a number of which have changed since the last time we looked at them on the channel. And then we're going to take a look forward to the future at the cards that are currently scheduled to release in December as well as January. There are a ton of sweet and exciting things in here. Let's go ahead and jump to it. Our next season pass card, Miss Marvel, releasing on November 7th, is still the exact same as last time we took a look at her. She is a 4/5 with the ongoing power. Adjacent locations where your cards have unique costs get +5 power. I stand by my evaluation of this card from last time. I think she is likely an incredibly powerful effect. With a little bit of proper play and smart deck building, she's going to be able to pump out 15 points worth of stats for 4 energy, and even under some bad circumstances or location variance, there's going to be plenty of times where she's going to be able to put out 10 points of stats quite easily for 4 energy, which is still solidly above rate. Gladiator, releasing on November 14th into Series 5, has a power downgrade from the first time we saw his data mine. He's now projected to be a 3/7 on release. Honestly, I think Gladiator's effect and his stat line is going to be pretty niche. I would be surprised if he finds a home outside of something like Silver Surfer. While his effect can definitely have upside in key spots, grabbing something like a Shang-Chi or a Shadow King that your opponent's hoping to save for an ideal moment, there's going to be a lot of other times where he's grabbing things that are much more than he can chew, meaning that he's kind of just negating the own power and presence that he puts on the board by giving your opponent their own large threat. Our next card, releasing on November 21st directly to Series 5, is Annihilus, also losing a point of power since the previous data mine. Annihilus is now a 5/7 with a very potent on-reveal effect. Your cards with 0 or less power switch sides, then destroy those who can't. This is obviously not only a card that can send opposing green goblins and hobgoblins back at your opponent, but it also has strong synergy with a number of my personally favorite cards like Hood or the Void that the Sentry creates, or even Debris, potentially putting 2 rocks on each side of your opponent's location. And he just gets rid of anything he can't send over to boot. This Super Viper, essentially, for every lane that we have in play is exactly the style of have some crap deck that I really enjoy playing. This is definitely my most anticipated release coming in November. The biggest change since we last looked at the November data mines is impacting the final card this month. Martyr, releasing to Series 4 on November 28th, is now a 1/4 with the ability still at the end of the game move to a location that loses you the game if possible. At a 2/6 that she was originally data mined to be, I thought Martyr was a really interesting and likely powerful card. As a 1/4, while she's still above rate for a 1 energy card in terms of the stats that she provides, and you could likely clog the board to mitigate her downside in a lot of situations, it's just hard to see a 1 energy card that's simply a pile of stats likely have a big impact on the game when a card like Killmonger is a prime metagame presence, not only in premier decks like Destroy, but also in decks playing varying tech cards like Sarah Control. Looking ahead to December, we have our next season pass card releasing on December 5th, Sebastian Shaw, a base 3/3 with the text, whenever this card permanently gains power, gain +2 more power wherever this is. The wherever this is part of Shaw's text box is especially important because it means effects like Okoye and Nakia that buff your cards when they're still in your deck or hand will be triggering his bonus. Other metagame staples that could make Shaw get larger are Forge as well as Silver Surfer. I know it's kind of cliche to point out any 3 energy card could be good with Surfer, but Shaw's effect means that he's going to effectively be a 3/7 without a drawback when you Surfer him up. And if you add another 3 energy card like Nakia into the mix, it feels like there could be a lot of synergy there. Surfer's primary problem, in my experience in the existing and previous metagames, is that it struggles to have singular cards that can get really tall in a single lane, and perhaps Sebastian Shaw is going to aid in solving that problem for the previous metagame powerhouse. Before we move along to our next December card, I want to point out that in December as well as January, according to the data mines, we are going to have a new direct to series card releasing the same week that the season pass rolls out. This would mean that Secondary is going to be increasing the total number of cards that they release in a season from 4 or 5 to 5 or 6. It means more toys to play with, but it also means it's going to be slightly more difficult / expensive to keep up with absolutely everything when it releases. I'd love to know in the comments down below if you think this small increase in card releases is a good, bad, or neutral thing, and why. Releasing directly to Series 5 on December 5th, we have the Blob as a 6/3 with the on-reveal effect. Merge your deck into this and gain its total power, as well as the ongoing effect can't be moved. This card has a couple of things to think about that are pretty interesting from a deck building perspective. The first is that on average, at the end of a game of Marvel Snap, your deck has 3 cards remaining in it, meaning if you want the Blob to be bigger than the average 6-drop, like say the Hulk, who has 12 power, we would need an average of a little over 3 power per card remaining in our deck at the end of the game when Blob merges into it. Another thing to consider is that because the Blob is merging your deck into himself, this is a 6-drop that will be a natural predator to Darkhawk, a card that's been a powerful metagame force since it was introduced, since Blob will be setting Darkhawk to 0 by absorbing the contents of your deck. Overall, in terms of power level, it feels like it's kind of hard to get a read on this one without actually playing games with it and seeing how it plays out in practice. But I think if Darkhawk continues to be a force in the metagame like it's always been, at a minimum, this card's going to have some interesting metagame considerations. Releasing directly to Series 5 on December 12th, our next card is the Firestar, a 6/3 with the on-reveal effect. Each card you played last turn gains this card's power. Obviously, the first card that jumps to mind when I read Firestar's text box is Mysterio, who plays out copies of himself to 3 locations. Just Mysterio and no other cards on 5 into a base Firestar on turn 6 means that Firestar is providing 12 points worth of stats to your board. If you mix in some synergy there, like say you end your turn 5 on Forge, so your Firestar then has 5 power to distribute to your board, things really start to get crazy and scale up. Not to mention if you mix in other potential buffs like Okoye and Nakia that we mentioned earlier, or you're powering up something like Shaw this season pass card, the amount of stats that Firestar is threatening to put out on turn 6 starts racking up into the double digits very, very quickly. Our next card releasing into Series 5 on December 19th is Havok, a base 2/1 that says after each turn you lose 1 max energy and this gains +3 power. I'm going to be honest, as someone who tries to really work outside the box and think of all the angles where a card could potentially be good, I'm kind of at a loss with this one. Losing max energy is a massive drawback, and what you're getting for losing max energy does not nearly seem worthwhile on a card that's going to eventually die to Shang-Chi or get those stats just wiped away by a Shadow King. Best use case scenario, I could see maybe you play Havok and then donate it across the board with a copy of Viper, so that way your opponent is stuck with the card that's chewing away at their max energy. I'd love to know in the comments down below if there's any use case that you're thinking of for Havok, or I wonder if this card's going to see some type of stat line or bonus change or even a rework in the next patch before he eventually releases in December. Our 5th and final card to be releasing in December, on December the 26th into Series 5, is Selene, a 1/1 with the on-reveal effect. The lowest power card in each player's hand gets -3 power. So, number of very little direct synergies with this card to start. Obviously, you have Green Goblin as well as Hobgoblin that get an even bigger negative number in your hand that you can contribute to your opponent's board. Whatever card your opponent's hand gets hit by is likely rendered mostly useless, or at the very least a bit neutered as you take away a bunch of stats from it. Selene also is going to have synergy with cards like Viper or Annihilus that's releasing in November as a way to send her across the board to clutter your opponent's space up even more. This is definitely one of the cards I'm most looking forward to in December because Viper is one of my favorite cards and she fits perfectly into those types of strategies. Looking into the new year, our recent data mines gave us a look at the early January cards for the first time. Slated to release on January 2nd as the Season Pass card, Skaar is a 6/11 with the ability cost 2 less for each of your cards that has 10 or more power. Whenever I see a card with a high stat line and cost reduction baked into it, the first question that always pops into my mind is, can I duplicate this card with Moon Girl and play more than one copy on the final turn of the game? In theory, a Zabu shell leveraging a variety of 4 energy 10 power cards such as Atuma, Typhoid Mary, and Sentry could Zabu on 2, play a 4 energy 10 power card on turns 3 and 4, play Moon Girl to duplicate Skaar on 5, and then dump 2 of him, plus have 2 energy left over on the final turn of the game. You can also just organically play out 10 power things on turns 3, 4, and 5, giving you a completely free Skaar on the final turn of the game, which is a big swing in a way that'll be difficult for your opponent to predict where exactly your stats are going to end up at. Our second card release in the new year, also happening on January 2nd, direct to Series 5, is Caiera. I'm sure I butchered that. Let me know in the comments down below. A 3/4 with an ongoing effect that I could not be more excited to see. Your 1 and 6 cost cards cannot be destroyed. I personally have long lauded Killmonger as one of the singular most offensive cards in Marvel Snap. It is a card that single-handedly shuts Khazar decks out from being competitive once you get into Series 2 all the way through the end game, and Caiera could finally be a card that lets that archetype maybe not be tier 1, but at least exist in a way where it's not just stone cold dead to this commonly played tech card. Outside of the obvious anti-Killmonger tech that she provides, I expect Caiera will also be phenomenal inside of decks looking to play massively statted things such as Lockjaw, which are historically susceptible to disruption from cards like Shang-Chi. Our next card, slated to release to Series 5 on January 9th, is Hercules, data mined to be a 4/6 with the text box. The first time another card moves here each turn, move it to another location. Hercules has obvious synergy with cards that want to move multiple times over the course of the game, specifically Human Torch, Dagger, and Vulture bouncing into Hercules' path and then immediately bouncing back out, all stand to gain fairly large stat lines. Human Torch, especially in conjunction with Celia, the card released the week before Hercules as protection from Killmonger, could have a really big glow up during this January season. Our next card coming to Series 5 on January 16th is the Grandmaster, a 2/0 with the on reveal effect. Move one of your other on reveal cards from here to the middle location. Its ability happens again. It's a really interesting mix of effects. You have synergy with other on revealed cards. The immediate place my mind goes is the Hood, one of my favorite cards. We can play Hood on turn 1, and then we can play Grandmaster on turn 2 to slide the Hood over and grab another demon. But this card doesn't just have on reveal synergies, it also works with movement cards, enabling something like Miles Morales to cost just 1 energy, or even give +2 stats to a Kraven that you've played out in the center location. I'd love to know in the comments down below where your brain goes with these overlapping synergies that Grandmaster provides. Our next release coming to Series 5 on January 23rd is Miek, a base 1/1 with the effect after each turn, if you discarded any cards, gets +1 power for each and then moves. Again, a pretty interesting and unique overlap of mechanics here, this time pairing move synergies with discard. The immediate thing that jumps to mind with this one is it essentially gives you some redundancy as kind of being a second virtual copy of Morbius inside of discard decks. Having two cards that scale up based on the cards that you've discarded over the course of the game seems like it'll be a big boon to those strategies, since in my experience your best games with discards are the ones where you have Morbius to play out. It'll be interesting to see if the movement aspect of this particular card ends up being relevant, or if it's just more of a random aspect to keep this card ping-ponging around the board, being difficult for your opponent to pin down. Our final card, releasing on January 30th into Series 5 to close out this 5-week season, is Beta Ray Bill, currently data mined to be a 4/5 whose on reveal is shuffle a Stormbreaker into your deck. Stormbreaker is a 0/1 whose on reveal effect doubles Beta Ray Bill's power. To start with, Beta Ray Bill has obvious synergy with Jane Foster the Mighty Thor, whose on reveal can find Stormbreaker in addition to your other 0 energy cards. A very obvious curve that kind of builds itself is Thor on turn 3, put Mjolnir in your deck, Beta Ray Bill on turn 4, put Stormbreaker in your deck, and then Jane Foster on turn 5 to grab the hammers for both of your lads. It's also worth noting that Beta Ray Bill isn't a static bonus like Thor gets from Mjolnir, instead scaling off of his current power. This means if we can play other cards like Forge or Okoye or Nakia that can buff him up, the bonus that he's going to be getting from the Stormbreaker can scale even larger over the course of the game. All in all, I think there's a lot of really awesome designs coming to Marvel Snap over the course of the next few months. I think especially the kind of dual synergy cards that we see releasing inside of January that look like they have the potential to support multiple archetypes are really interesting, and I assume we'll see more of that kind of overlapping design space explored as Marvel Snap card pool continues to mature. It is worth noting that all of the cards that I've speculatively reviewed here that are releasing after upcoming patches are very likely subject to change, just like we saw the energy cost and power of a number of the November card releases change in today's video from the last time that we data mined them. That being said, all of the text boxes on those cards stayed identical, so I would wager the core designs of all of the cards that we looked at today will be staying relatively stable as the game continues to develop forward. As always, if you enjoyed my breakdown on this topic, I'd encourage you to snap that like button to help this video reach some more people. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You watched this video all the way through to the end, so you probably enjoyed my musings on the topic. I'd love to see you back again sometime for some more excellent Marvel Snap content here on the YouTube side.